All right, here we are again for worksheet 2-8 for discovering pre-algebra part 1. And in this one, we're talking about absolute value, and we're starting to solve these more complex absolute value equations. Okay, so give me a second when you're grading it. Remember, before I put this answer key up, you must remember that there are two answers for x. There should always be two answers for x because it's in that absolute value. So go ahead and double check, make sure you have two answers for each one, and I'm going to throw that answer key out. So there are the answers to this worksheet. You know the drill, pause, grade yourself, and when I come back, I will show you how I got those answers. All right, so I'm going to assume that you guys have paused. All right, so an x has two different ways that it can get to 16. It could have been a positive 16 because the absolute value of a positive 16 is 16, which is true. Or I could put a negative 16 inside of there because a negative 16, the absolute value of that is also a positive 16, which would make it a true statement. Okay? Now for this one, I could have put if I put a positive 21 in there, the absolute value of a 21, even if it's negative, is positive. Or I could have put a negative in for that x, and that would look like this, a negative negative, which would go back to positive, and the absolute value of a positive 21, guess what? It's also 21. So that's how I got those answers. Now for this one, it's a little bit different. We got to do the positive and the opposite of what's in the absolute value. So a negative x minus 5 equals 7. All right, so now I got to subtract 5. And one possible answer for x is going to be 2. And over here, I'm going to add 5 so that the other possible answer, divide by -1, this is the most forgot about step. Don't forget it. X could also be a -12. All right, in this one, we have a -2 equals 18, or we take the opposite of what's in the absolute value, a positive 2 equals 18. Well, in this one, if I divide both sides by a -2, I'm going to get x equals a -9. And over here, if I divide both sides by positive 2, it's x equals 9. All right, so I have the positive, and then I have the opposite, because I can have the opposite in there and still get that 22. So remember, you're taking the opposite of every individual thing in there. Okay, only the stuff though inside of that absolute value. All right, so I have to add 19 to both sides. So x is going to equal, one of its things is going to be a 41. Or I'm going to subtract 19 from both sides. That's going to give me a 3. And once I divide that negative, I get a -3. So those are the two possible answers. Now this one's a little bit tricky because dividing does not make it a different term. So when we distribute through an opposite or negative, it only distributes through to each term. This is just one term. If I made both the x and the 5 negative, what would happen is it would go back to positive. Two negatives make a positive. So that's not what I want. I want this condition, and I want one where what's in the absolute value is a negative. So only one thing gets the negative. I'm going to put it on the x. Doesn't matter. You could have put it on the 5. It actually is quicker if you put it on the 5, but it doesn't really matter, and I want to show you the different variations. So to get rid of this, it's dividing x, so I'm going to multiply it to both sides. And one of our answers is that x is going to equal 10. On this one, do the same thing, multiply 5 on both sides, and I'm going to get a negative x equals 10, and once I divide out that negative, it's going to be a -10. All right, for this next one, same thing that we've been doing. We have the positive, just drop the absolute values, and then we have to have the opposite of that, of what's in the absolute value. So I'm going to add that 9 to both sides, which is going to give me 20. 2x equals 20. Got to divide out that 2, and one possibility is that x can be 10. On this side, I'm going to subtract by 9. That's going to give me a 2 on the right-hand side. Once I divide out that negative 2, I'm going to have a negative 1. So those are my two possibilities for x. Same song and dance. I'm going to do 3x plus 9 equals a negative 12. And I'm going to do a negative 3x minus 9 equals a negative 12. The opposite of what's in the absolute value. Subtract 9 on both sides, and I'm going to get 3x equals a negative 21. So x is going to be a negative 7. That's one of our choices. Over here, I'm going to add it to both sides, which is going to give me a negative 3. And when I divide that out, the other possibility is x is 1. All right, another one like this. Now, this time we have something multiplied from the outside. Okay? And a lot of times, I mean, you can keep it there and solve, but it gets kind of confusing quick. A little trick, get rid of it. Okay? So I'm going to divide both sides by a negative 1 before I even look at that absolute value. Okay, and let's go ahead and look at what that becomes. That becomes 2x plus 9 in absolute values equals a negative 27. Now I have that absolute value all by itself. So I don't have to worry about what to put here or there or anywhere. I can just do that situation, and I can take the opposite of. Okay, so sometimes isolating that absolute value makes it easier. I'm going to subtract 9 on both sides, which is going to give me 2x equals a negative 36, divide, and I'm going to get a negative 18. That's one of my answers. All right, this time I'm going to add 9 on both sides, which is going to give me negative 2x equals negative 18. Divide out that negative, and I'm going to get a positive 2. All right, again, it's a lot easier if I isolate this absolute value. Not saying that you have to. I may have done it another way in class, but I'm going to do the easiest method here in the video. Those are going to cancel, leaving me just with that absolute value. And it's going to equal negative 10. So I have two ways of doing this. Either x plus 5 equals a negative 10, or a negative x minus 5 equals a negative 10. Only what's in the absolute value becomes the opposite of. I'm going to subtract 5 from both sides, making it x is equal to a negative 15 as one of my solutions. I'm going to add 5 to both sides, making it a negative 5 on the right for this one. Divide out that negative, and it's either 5 or negative 15. Again, don't have to, especially because it's addition. The confusing ones are the multiplication and division on the outside of the absolute value. Adding and subtracting really doesn't change the answer that much, but since I've already started isolating my absolute value before I do math, I'm going to do it here too. That becomes a negative 12. Going to add it on the other side, which is going to give me a 41. Now I'm going to do x minus 2 equals 41 and negative x plus 2 equals 41. Opposite of what's in the absolute value. Add 2 on both sides, and one possible solution is, one of the solutions is 43, and on the other side it's going to be a negative 39. All right, here's the hard one. We have that 3. Okay, I'm going to teach you guys a trick this time, but we definitely want to get this absolute value by itself if I'm going to do this trick, because it'll be less math we have to worry about. 4 to 20, so 16. Yeah, that makes sense. All right, so gonna do my two possibilities. Do the opposite of. All right, so a trick to get rid of fractions is you take the denominator and you multiply every term in it by it. So basically, I'm distributing through a 3 before I do any math. What this does is it cancels out the bottom. Showing you a trick, you can do it a different way. We're going to be doing a lot of fractions in this class. Thought I might show you a trick. 3 times negative 12 is a negative 36. And last but not least, you cannot forget about taking 3 and multiplying it to that 16. That's going to be a 48. Okay, now my fractions are gone. And actually, I'm going to get the same answer because what I have is an equivalent equation, just like I would an equivalent fraction. I was fair to everything, so it's equivalent, just like 1/2 is the same as 2/4. All right, so when I add this together, it's going to be 84, divide both sides by 2, and one of the answers is a 42. How to get a 43? I got a 43 because I can't read my own handwriting. It's written as a 42 on my answer key. So I don't know how it became 43 when it got on the paper. But yes, it is a 42. Now I could do the same thing to this one. I'm going to multiply everything by 3, and it's going to give me a negative 2x, a positive 36 equals 48 still. Subtract 36 on both sides. And I get a 12, divide both sides by that negative 2, and I get a negative 6. And those are the two possible answers for x. All right, keep doing it until you feel comfortable with it. If you have any questions, let me know, and I'll see you guys in class.